Welcome to the Finding Joy in the Journey podcast. This is Sheridan Ripley from Enjoy Life. I'm a wife and a mother of 3 boys ranging from 22 to 14. I'm an author of 5.5 books. I love to teach my online courses, and I also love doing one-on-one coaching with women. I'm excited that you joined me here today as I'm going to share some tips and tools to help you find joy in your journey through life. Today, our topic is your brain. Is it your friend or your foe? Well, I think that the real answer to that is understanding how our brain or our brains work. Because once we understand our brain, it suddenly is easier for it to be our friend. So I like to teach my kids that we have 4 parts of our brain, and I give them easy names to remember. So our brain stem is like our lizard brain, and it's all about that fight, flight, or freeze response. It's all about surviving. Then we have our animal brain. This is our limbic part of our brain. It holds our basic drives and emotions, and it's like our feelings and connections to other people. Then we have our human brain. Our human brain is the cortex or outer layer of our brain. It helps us to think, it holds our memories. And how I like to understand it, it's more like our intellectual type of connections with other people and even with ourselves. Then we have our angel brain. So this is our prefrontal cortex part of our brain. It's where we have moral judgments and values. It's basically the part of our brain that allows us to pause before we act. It's what gives us insight and allows us to have empathy. So understanding that we're human and it's normal to have all 4 parts of our brain, that really helps give me clarity and helps me to have more patience with myself, but also allows me to live more in my human and especially my angel part of my brain. So every day we have to remember. So this is part of our human nature. Basically, it's really easy to forget who we are and why we're here. And it's actually been such a problem that it's talked about in the scriptures all the time that we need to remember. Think of the times of Moses when God provided manna in the wilderness, and there were so many miracles, but he still needed his children to remember, but they couldn't seem to remember who they really were. I think that it's, again, human nature, but if we can remember who we are, that we have this natural self and our spiritual self. And when we remember what it is we value, then that allows us to harness the power of our human brain and our angel brains. When our angel brain is in charge, or I like to think of it, when our spirit is in charge of our mind and our body, things just go so much better. But again, it's sometimes hard to remember to have our angel brain be in charge. It's something we have to work on every single day and sometimes multiple times of the day. For me, starting my day off with a spiritual habit of my empowers, which is my meditation, prayer, scriptures, and writing in my journal, that really helps me to remember who I am and what I want to be for the day. But prayer, especially morning prayer, is especially important because I feel like when we sleep, and at least for me, when I wake up, I'm always a little fuzzy and I'm always kind of like, okay, wait, who am I? What's going on? And so by having that morning prayer and that connecting with God every morning, it really helps me to turn my angel brain on and get back to who I want to be. So when we harness the power of our brain, by understanding it, then we can use it to be our friend instead of our foe. Let me talk about this in an example that I think is familiar to people. So we've developed patterns of behavior over the years, and as we have these patterns of behavior, it forms pathways in our brain. And these are very familiar pathways. They may not be in alignment with our values, but it feels good because it's familiar. And this is what makes change a challenge because of those pathways, but it is still possible. So a wonderful familiar pathway, wonderful in quotes, is that if I ask my husband to do the dishes and then I go to book club and I come back and the dishes aren't done, I have a familiar pathway of getting frustrated and maybe yelling at him. So that's not in alignment with my value of being kind to others, but it feels good because it is a familiar pathway. Now, in a different podcast, I'm going to talk about feelings and acknowledging them and our thoughts, and I'll touch on that actually a little bit in a minute. But I'm not just saying we shouldn't acknowledge our feelings or thoughts. In fact, we should. That is one thing that helps us to change. But being aware that the reason why it feels so good to yell in that situation is because we have a familiar pattern or pathway in our brain. And understanding that helps us to see why sometimes it is challenging, but then also helps us to see it is possible to create a new pathway. What really helps me with this is understanding again my brain and the 90 seconds. So when we yell at somebody, it sometimes feels like we flip our lids. Like literally we're like going straight to that animal or lizard part of our brain. Our angel and maybe even our human brain just aren't working well for us. We have this gut emotional reaction. And when that happens, when I come home and see the dishes in the sink, there's literally a flood of hormones released into my brain. Whenever that happens, it takes 90 seconds for those hormones to process through your brain. They've done studies. So if you can stay calm and just allow those hormones and emotions and thoughts and feelings to kind of flow through you for about 90 seconds, it will clear out and your angel brain can be in charge. However, if we just escalate it, try and talk ourselves out of being mad, or try and talk ourselves into why we should be mad, then it just releases more hormones and we get stuck in that pattern even stronger. So this 90-second thing is powerful, and when I understood how my brain worked, it helped me so much to make changes. Because understanding our brain gives us that power to change. We should accept our thoughts and feelings and understand we have that familiar pathway. It's normal to want to go to that pattern we've always gone to. Understanding that hormones are real. It isn't just as simple as changing our thoughts, especially when we have a very strong pattern of something. That really there's more at play also can help me understand my brain and be patient with myself as I learn to change my behaviors. Understanding why we're supposed to take 10 deep breaths makes me actually do it. I remember when I was younger and I'd get upset, my mom would say, take 10 deep breaths before you respond. But I was like, that's stupid. That doesn't make any sense. But when I learned about the 90 seconds and how it takes 90 seconds for my brain to process those hormones, suddenly taking 10 deep breaths made so much more sense. And I found that when I took that time, sometimes I'd even try counting to 90, suddenly I was able to go to my angel brain and allow that to be in charge. That gave me a lot of power to then learn how to use my brain and understanding my brain to then make the changes that I wanted to have more joy in my journey. So I hope that this is a very brief overview of our brain, but I hope that it gives you some ideas of how you can use your brain to let it be your friend. Also, I have other podcast episodes about thoughts and feelings and how we can use those to help us to raise our vibrations and stay in a more positive state. Enjoy!